Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we're talking about the Duchess. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Mac Wright. If you like what you're seeing, like and subscribe. We're almost to 1,000 subscribers. Trying to make that push. But let's get into the amp. Today we're talking about the Duchess V40 by Victory Amplifiers. This amp is a British take on an American voiced amp. And as someone who loves Fender amps, who loves those American style amplifiers, I was very intrigued by this, and I had heard a lot about Victory amps and heard a lot of really good things about Victory amps. So I decided, you know what? Let's do it. Let's get one, see what it's all about. So I paid for this with my own money. I just wanted to see. It was more about my own curiosity. Hopefully you're curious too. Let's get into it. First things first, we got to talk about the history of Victory amplifiers. So Victory amps have been around since about 2014. Their chief designer is named Martin Kidd, and he is very well known and respected in British amp circles. And one of my favorite things that their website says about their approach to designing amps is they say that they have a modern boutique approach to design and specification. What this means is that they use hand-wired boards where they feel that it's appropriate and hand-wired things where they feel that it serves the amp the best, and then they use printed boards where they feel that that serves the amp to the best of its ability. This, in my mind, is great because what that means is that they're making conscious decisions. They're not just doing a process for the sake of a process. They're not doing hand-wired just so they can say they're hand-wired. Instead, they're doing a process for the sake of the end result, which in my mind is a really awesome way to look at designing amps. The main statement on their website is, "We value simplicity in operation, flexibility in use, and absolutely no compromise in tone. Our aim is simple, to create amplifiers that inspire you ever onwards in your playing and never let you down." So let's see if they achieved that with the Duchess. So the amp that I got specifically is called the Duchess V40 Compact Head. The reason why it's called the Compact Head is because it still has that wooden chassis like a typical amp does instead of like a lunchbox style amp head. However, it is smaller, like the size of a lunchbox head. I chose to get this one because it is, like I said, an American style amp, which I love. I know I have a Vox over my shoulder, but when it comes to gigging and overall use, I tend to lean more towards those Fender style amps, as well as I use a lot of pedals and I like to tweak my tone with pedals like we all do, and this is supposed to be their best pedal platform. They describe it as having vintage style American cleans all the way to vintage British breakup. Now, before we dive into how they achieve this, we have to first talk about and define these terms of what is an American style amp versus a British style amp. And this has to do mainly with our EQ. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what EQ is and how EQ works, I recommend this video. It is my no frills, just facts video on EQ. You can watch that, come right back, it'll all make sense. But if you're familiar with EQ, essentially what we're looking at is when we talk about American style amps, we're talking specifically about the kind of Fender black panel era, that mid-60s scooped frequency sound, meaning that we got strong lows, strong highs with the scooped mid-range, typical Fender sound. That is the American voiced amp. Then over on the British side across the pond, we've got more of a mid-range focus, they call it. It's very tight, it's very sharp, and it, you know, we could think of that more as like our Vox or our Marshall sound, right? So the Duchess has some switches on it that enable us to reach these American colors versus British colors while still maintaining that single channel amp configuration. The first switch that we got to talk about is our voice switch. We have voice 1 and voice 2. Voice 1 is considered that typical black panel, mid-60s Fender sound, scooped mid-range, right? That's our typical American sound, and that's what we get when we have it on voice 1. Voice 2 enables us to get a little bit more of that 50s Fender characteristic, kind of a tweed sound, which has a little bit more mid-range in it than our typical black panel 60s sound. Not as much mid-range focus like we get out of a British amp, but still that tweed sound that you can kind of think of and hail back to when you think of voice 2. Then we have the mid kick switch. And when you turn that mid kick switch on, this is where they say that we really dive into that British mid-focused amp territory. So when you turn on the mid switch, it boosts your mids, obviously, and then it essentially strengthens that mid dial. And the more you crank that mid, the more drive and British vintage grit you're going to push into your sound. So that's the overall configuration. Let's talk about flexibility. First off, we've got some serious volume control for a 42-watt amplifier. On the front, you have a high and a low switch. When you're on high, you've got that total 42-watt power. When you're on low power, you have about 7 watts of output. And then on top of that, on the back, they have what's called a single-ended mode, which allows you to essentially reduce it down to just one of the tubes, making it so that you have actually less than a single watt of output. So that means that you can get great bedroom sounds all the way up to venue sounds. And we're talking big venue sounds. It also comes equipped with an effects loop. If you're unfamiliar with what those are and how they work, you can watch this video here. But if you want to throw your modulation, your delays, your reverbs on after the preamp, you can totally do that. That's an option. It also comes with an onboard digital reverb. Now this is a modern style reverb, not necessarily like our typical spring reverb. It's more voiced towards like a hall to a plate feel. And you can get some pretty washy tones out of it. In addition to that, it comes with a foot switch that can plug into the back that will turn the reverb on and off. And on top of that, there is an actual on-off switch on the panel of it. So if you want to cut the reverb out completely and make sure that it's off for recording purposes, you could do that. Lastly, and something that I find fascinating about it is that they give you the option of running it with 6L6 power tubes or EL34 power tubes. Now switching these out will only provide a subtle difference. It's not going to change the whole character of your amp, and an amp is a sum of its parts. So, you know, changing one part is not going to do a lot, but it can do something, right? It will provide a little bit more of tweakability. Again, it's that flexibility that they boast. So the power tubes are tucked away behind a nice metal grill that's easily accessible. You can swap them out if you need to, and the bias switch is easily accessible as well, so you can make sure that they are properly tuned. As for the construction, it's really cool. It simultaneously feels very sturdy and it's very lightweight. It's only around 20 pounds. The sturdiness comes from the fact that it sits on a wooden chassis, but all of the panels and things that give you access to the inside of the amp's head are metal. They're a lightweight metal, but a metal nonetheless. And so it feels like everything in there is pretty well protected. As you can see, I also got the matching 1x12 cabinet. It looks like, according to their website and according to Sweetwater, they don't make that anymore. Now they have something that's a little bit more of a generic 1x12 cabinet, and it's supposedly a little lighter than this one. But so I got that. It is a wooden chassis as well. The speaker is actually slightly angled upwards, which is a nice little touch, and it has a Celestion Creamback in it, so it is definitely still sticking with that vintage style sound. Now, I've been talking for a while. They say it's a great pedal platform, so I decided to throw a little clip on there of what it sounds without a pedal, and then threw some overdrive on it, see if it handles the overdrive well. Let me know in the comments. Here's that. right, so these are my thoughts on it. Overall, great amp. It's almost impossible for it not to be a great amp and a great tool to keep in your tool belt or a weapon to keep in your arsenal, however you personally philosophize your guitar playing. We have to talk about what it looks like. It's beautiful, and we can say we don't care about how it looks, but we do. We all care. This amp is beautiful. The cream with the leather accents, I mean, and the big V on it, it looks like it's like a designer handbag. I mean, it's genuinely just like a work of art in and of itself to look at. It is definitely easy to use. One panel, one channel. You know, we've got the switches, we can mess around. It's got enough tweakability so you're not bored and feel like you don't have any options, but it also isn't gonna overwhelm you with all the switches and the ranges and blah, 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 blah. I definitely think it's lightweight. I think with the cabinet, I think the cabinet sits around 30 to 40 pounds. The head sits around 20 pounds. So you're looking at, you know, 50 to 60 pounds, which is a typical combo weight. Now you have it in two hands. On top of that, the head is pretty small. I mean, you know, you can kind of throw it in a suitcase if you needed to. Don't know that I recommend that, but you could if you wanted to. And all of that is great, especially when you consider that you're getting 42 watts of output and all the flexibility. As far as the feel, you know, the touch responsiveness of it, it's one of the more sensitive amps that I own, and I tend to be a pretty aggressive player, and because of that, there tends to be this kind of high range poke that can be a bit much, especially in the room in the 2 to 5K range, that when you dig in too much, it's a little aggressive, kind of more aggressive than I personally would care for, but that could be a me problem. Maybe I should just learn to be a better player rather than blaming it on the gear. I know that's a wild concept to some of us. With that, I do wonder if switching to the 6L6s would, you know, give me enough of a difference there that I'd be satisfied. In addition to that, I do know that the Creamback is known for being a little bit more of a mid to high frequency focused speaker, so maybe swapping the speaker out could tame that down a little bit. I guess I wish it was a little bit more comfortable and forgiving, but again, maybe I should stop asking the amp to cover my sins and just figure out how to be a better player. In addition to that, I think that I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the reverb. It sounds great, but it's not what I'm used to. It's not that typical spring reverb, which is not a bad thing. It's just different, and I guess I'm just not used to it yet. It's still reverb, right? This big expensive Vox over my shoulder that's more expensive than this one was doesn't even have reverb on it, so I'd rather have the reverb than not have it. Anyway, it's not bad, just different. Let's talk price. The head comes in at $1,649, and the closest 112 cabinet that you can get to this is at $899, which puts you at around $2,550 for the set. If you just get the head, save $1,000. That's kind of nice. Overall, I think for what you're getting, I would say that's probably like exactly where I would price it, right? It's handcrafted. It looks really good, and the flexibility that you get and the tone that you get from it is what I personally feel like you should get out of that kind of money. Flaws and all, right? I don't think any amp is going to be perfect, or maybe it will be one day, but I've never played through one that's like, well, this solves all my problems, right? This solves almost all of my problems, and that's good enough for me, right? So sitting at around $2,550, I think it's worth it. I think you get great flexibility. I think you get great options that we discussed in the flexibility section. And honestly, it's an amp that's designed to be inspiring to anyone who plugs into it. And that's what it does. I've already written some really cool stuff on it, and I look forward to writing more with it. But what do you guys think? Have you tried Victory amps? Did you like the sound samples that I had? Do you wish I had done more? Do you own another one of the Victory amps? I'm curious about those as well. I got a lot of questions. Just talk to me. Talk to me in the comments, please. Also, like and subscribe, man. My analytics say that 1% of my viewers are subscribed. So, you know, think about subscribing if you like what you're seeing. I got a lot of fun stuff coming in the year, a lot of gear reviews, a lot of conceptual things. Anyway, once again, my name is Mac Wright. Please go make someone else's day better. We're going to go ahead and find out if this amp can also do jazz. And so I'll play you out on a little jazz tune. We'll see you around.